whereas most of them look fairly plausible terrestrial, and there was kind of this power law distribution of those.
So here's, once we really got our atmosphere shader working and we got the terrain shader working, this is just what the game looks like now, more or less. Yeah, and just a quick tour of some randomly generated planets. We've got a batch process that runs every night and generates 100 or 200,000 planets just to test the script, see if, are they all generating fast enough, are any of them causing problems for us. One of the things we have to worry about is once you get out from the planet, you've got this giant universe of stuff to explore with black holes and planetary nebula and gas giants and stuff like that. So this is a collection of Hubble Space Telescope photographs of kind of interesting things in the universe. And we thought, well, we have to match at least some of these. And we've got, again, this scriptable system, the same one that we're using to sculpt planets and the same one that we're using to paint creatures, that we use to script kind of the inhabitants of the galactic zoo. And so one of our artists, Kate Compton, did these little effects, and each one of these is a little text script effect to represent planetary nebulas and
yeah, so these are the Hubble photos, and these are basically from in-game. Our attempts to recreate a lot of this kind of zoo of things that you find out in interstellar space.
There was a big question here about sort of how scientific and realistic should this be, and how cute and playful and colorful should it be, and that was a lot of sort of back and forth on that. Like it doesn't.
In fact, in the entire game, we kind of start from a more cartoony at the cell level, less realistic, more cute, and working up to the space, it gets more progressively realistic. You can see these images.
I mean,
reflect
we
that.
have to deal with a giant galaxy with 100 million stars in it and planets around each of them, and it's just hard to get something that doesn't look realistic. I mean, once you get to that scale, and obviously we popped up the colors and made stuff sort of more vivid than it would be, but we just sort of shied away from giant bouncing happy planets.
Big
Just
smile.
don't have eyes.
But the cells do.
The cells do, exactly.
Okay. So this is kind of in game right now. All these things kind of add up together. Now, next person I want to introduce you to is Chaim, who I brought on very early doing prototyping for the game, a lot of the kind of core gameplay. But also, when he joined the team, I put him full-time in charge of the editors, which is a huge part of Spore, as well as the cell game. And he's also looking at unification of like UI and stuff across the game. But really, between these things, the editors, the prototypes, there's a very kinesthetic sense to all this. The player's touching this, and we want these things to feel like toys. And that was a big challenge for us, is how to make the editors, not feel like work, but feel like something that you kind of understand. And a lot of games, there's an underlying metaphor. And people play The Sims, they kind of understand that this is Dollhouse, they play Quake, it kind of feels like Cowboys and Indians. And discovering kind of the underlying metaphor for what you're working on is a tremendous help in kind of conveying to the player an existing framework in which to understand something. So I'm going to have Chaim come up here and first talk a little bit about the editors, but then show you some of his prototypes that he did earlier on in the project.
So one of the things we have to do in making the editors is we're trying to find like that toy-like quality, like what makes something fun to touch and play with, like kinesthetically fun to touch, and a lot of it is sort of finding sort of like how an artist does something. So for example, here's an ocean's diagram of a limb. Find out how an artist does something, like reverse engineer their process, and then figure out how to put it into a toy so the player sort of has all that knowledge in something they can touch and is tactile. One of the challenges we had was figuring out where to put like all the creature parts, how would we take all of this content and structure in a way that the player would find accessible and would unlock in the game. Here's some cells in a family tree. So one of the things we found is that